was Booty and the Hoefish?
There were some birds.
Uh, I guess no choice but to do it.
Well, technically, we always have a choice, Sean.
Wait. I have a choice, and I'm Sean? But who are you?
I have no choice, and I'm Tyler.
I'm Sean with a choice, and you're Tyler the Choiceless.
I am Tyler SOL.
Well, if you didn't have a choice, what were you forced into drinking today?
Well, okay, so I'm going to. I haven't grabbed a drink yet. I've been up for a little while. I've already had a coffee. I've already had a glass of water. So I am having a drink, but I cannot express to you how much I do not want something room temperature. As much as I love whiskey, I love room temperature whiskey the most. I cannot drink anything room temperature today. So I'm going to open up the thing where I keep my drinks cold. I'm going to close. I have not looked. I have my eyes closed right now, actually. I'm just going to reach my hand in and grab something. And I'm going to see what happens.
Would you like a room temperature drink if your room was 37 degrees?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, all right. So I have something. I've grabbed a Dragon's Milk White, which is the bourbon barrel-aged white stout.
So I don't know what to think about that. I've always hated bourbon barrel aged not bourbons.
I do too, but this one's actually pretty decent.
And I love milk stouts. And so the Dragon's Milk should be like my favorite thing ever, but the bourbon barrel aged is just I'm not a fan. I hate that sourness.
I'm not a fan either. I normally don't like any of them. But this one's actually it's the best version of that thing. So it's still not like a great drink, but like you could get just two of them. So I was like, I'll get two of them. I wouldn't get 12, but I'd get two.
Yes.
And now I have one.
So, that was very interesting, but is there any particular reason why the two of us are rambling on and on about drinks?
Why? Because we have Asperger's.
Ah, yes.
Oh, you mean like right now?
Yes.
Why? That's because we're the Soupy Whisker Brothers Pasta Rover.
Yes. The Soupy Whisker Brothers Passover.
The Passover. Well, I almost said it's nearing Passover time, but it is not.
It's already passed us over.
It has, and soon we'll do it again. It happens every year.
And I didn't even eat a pancake.
I'm pretty sure I did, but not because it was the Passover. Just because pancakes are pretty darn good.
That's true. Well, if we are the brothers of the Whoopie Skisker,
The Woofy School Fur.
the Whoopie Skisker, if we are, I said I was going to stop being tired, but it didn't work. People say that mind over matter is good. However, when you put all of your matter over a mine, you may blow up.
I think it depends on the type of mine.
Yes.
Some mines don't start to blow up until you have moved your matter off of the mine.
And some mines don't blow up, rather you fall down into them.
Whereas that would be, well, you might have to walk into some of them.
That's true. But, anyways, I am drinking, Monkey Shoulder.
Ooh.
Oh, are you also drinking Monkey Shoulder? It sounds like you are.
Haha, I made the noises.
The second half of book 3 starts with a chapter titled Sexual Morality. And
It does.
yeah.
Chapter 5 is where we're going.
Yes. And that is that could be, you know, it definitely takes some of the edge off of this chapter to poop while talking about it.
I don't know. This is before we start this. I guess this is where I was joking about us having Asperger's earlier. But it is a thing. Is that why we're so okay with doing what I'm doing right now?
Talking while pooping or talking about sex while pooping?
I mean, all the above, but specifically the first. I don't think it matters what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, talking is talking. I'm not observing you, so why does it matter?
You make a good point.
Although that said, though, I have been sitting down pooping across the bathroom from a multi-person bathroom, across the bathroom from another man who was sitting down pooping. We were directly across from each other, and our bathroom had no stall doors, and there was nothing to do but talk to each other while it was going on.
Really?
Yeah.
See, part of me has always thought, like, that might be an experience, you know?
Yeah. And then, like, there was special toilet paper that we weren't allowed to use, and I had some that we were allowed to use, and so we would, like, while talking, we'd, like, toss it back and forth as we needed it. And
I've got to ask, are you being serious right now?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. What a strange person.
That was at basic training.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
No, never mind. I completely leave the story now. So I was like, where's the joke? No, I get it. Alright, sexual morality. Is the sex instinct or Christianity that's wrong? That's the underlying question here. He addresses a lot of stuff here that I find it's all very interesting, so I don't want to say I find it interesting. It's C.S. Lewis, of course, is interesting.
I've never been bored by C.S. Lewis.
No, never once. I think that's like a good tagline for it that I was reading. When I read this stuff, I like to go and find companions to kind of go along with it, because I do like hearing other people's ideas about it too. I mean, I do my own analysis, I do my own thinking, and then I see what other people think about it. And one of the questions that was raised by another person doing kind of what we're doing is that line that I just had there, that I didn't come up with that. Is it the sex instinct or Christianity that's wrong? And so C.S. kind of asks, he kind of says a few things in here addressing that. It's basically people talking about how times have changed and why hasn't the church, and this has changed and why hasn't the church in regards to sexual morality. He goes over that a lot. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I do like that very much, that he hits on the like the difference between propriety and chastity, because that's a big thing. That's always been really a big thing with the church. It is, and I like that he does do that, because of course, you know, like he says, a person is being unchaste if they are intentionally, for the desire, or like for a sexual reason, making themselves improper in that way, carrying themselves or dressing themselves improperly in that way. But just because, you know, like, but when you're in a society where those actions are not improper, I mean, well, not that, you know, to an extent. I mean, there are some actions that are always going to be, but I mean, as far as I can change it to appearance, like how I look is not improper. Like if I'm walking around without any clothes on in a place where no one is wearing clothes and nobody cares, I'm not being unchaste. Whereas if I am, like where I'm sitting there and I'm like, hey, you know what? I am, well, and then again, in some places I could be unchaste by showing off my ankles.
This is I didn't think we were going to stop and talk about this the way that I'm about to, because I don't think it was something that I was like, well, this isn't something that we're going to want to dwell on. But now that you said that, it brings up a really interesting question that I've kind of always had. This is where that the whole sort of working out your own salvation with fear and trembling thing really, for me, like I think about that a lot when I think about this stuff. There are different parts of the world, obviously, especially in more underdeveloped areas of the world, where you've seen a National Geographic where women walk around with their boobs out all the time, and guys might not be wearing any pants. And like, wow, if we did that anywhere in the United States, I mean, at least everyone would be raising an eyebrow, bare minimum, right? Even in the most crazy, weird places you could go, people are gonna be like, that person is naked. That is strange. Clearly, it's normal in all these places, and clearly, it's not causing any kind of strange issue in any of these places because it's the norm. So, we always see people, you know, whether you see pictures on the internet of people who are somewhere dressed some ridiculous way, or this sort of thing, or we start to, like, clothing has become over time. I mean, it's not hard to see that over time you can see clothing get more and more revealing, or get more and more this, or get more and more that. As a guy, it's not really something that you ever really think about for your clothing, because it's very rarely a thing that makes any difference. But in churches where we were growing up, obviously it was a big deal for all the women in the church.
Yeah.
At what point is it completely acceptable because it is the way that the normal thing is going? I don't even know if we want to talk about that, but it's just a question that's kind of hit my head, because it's like, well, that's the whole thing. That he's completely right there. If it's the normal thing, if it's the thing that everyone's expecting, if it's what we know is going to be happening, well, then it's not any different than, say, the way that we've all changed the style of clothes that we've worn since we stopped wearing the clothes the Pilgrims were wearing when we came over from the Mayflower.
Yeah. So here's the as far as for society goes, you know, there comes a point where, like, I think, like, society isn't or cannot change. Certain societies cannot change to a certain point, I guess. So, like, in today's world, we have this free the nipple movement that I don't think will ever actually gain real traction. But as far as, you know, now it's the normal thing that girls can have their boobs out in Western civilization. But the entire reason for it is it's done for the entire thing is they want to make it, they want to do it just either specifically for the shock value of doing it, which isn't right, or they want to do it because in Western culture, and the reason why girls have traditionally covered their breasts in Western culture is because breasts are viewed in some way or other, or female breasts are, sexually in Western civilization, and so they want, and the goal is to get that uncovered for that reason. And so because of that and how it's going for that reason, I don't think it would ever be acceptable in Western culture. Like, even if this took off and they said, there, now look, girls, it's the normal, proper thing to do, or it's normal and it's not improper to whip your boobs out in public, other than for the purpose of breastfeeding, I still don't think that would ever, you know, that, no, like, I still don't think that would ever be okay, because it's so ingrained in society that we like these things so much. Just like,
so here's the thing, and this is the reason why I didn't know if we'd end up talking about this. This is, interestingly enough, going to be something that we're going to have completely different points of view on. So I actually, when this whole thing, I don't want to say started, but when the whole Free the Nipple thing kind of started gaining traction, right? When it was becoming more and more popular
Yeah.
of a movement, people started talking about it more. Because obviously it started out in the West Coast. There actually was a documentary about it, and I'm like, a documentary about Free the Nipple? This is just going to be a bunch of nudity for no reason. And then I looked it up and realized it actually does not contain any nudity. I'm like, so this is literally just talking about the thing. Well, I'm going to watch this because I am extremely curious. I want to hear the people who actually started it and what the whole thing is. And it is actually incredibly interesting documentary, which most are. But while there are people who are fringe and might do the things that you're referring to, which I'm not saying there's not, I haven't met every single person who knows. But the people who started all of it came out, first of all, I think like two of the main people were lesbians, if I remember correctly. And they were making the comment saying, clearly, we have no desire to go out here and make men want to look at us lustfully. We don't even like men. The first issue is that it's actually illegal. In nearly everywhere in the United States, it is illegal for a woman to walk around with her top off.
Yeah.
Now, for all of the reasons that you would understand making this become law, I mean, because of what you just said, right? It's been such a long time viewed as sexual thing that people are like, we're not going to have a woman walk around with their shirt off, because then what's this guy going to do, right? It's not meant to be mean to women. It's meant to be like, this could be a safety issue for this woman. That's obviously why it was started. And so their first thing is saying the fact that it is illegal for this versus this. Like, obviously, if I go out with my shirt on, people are going to think it's a bit odd in certain places, but no one's going to arrest me. So the inverse of that is saying we find it to be unfair that it's a law in general. They're like, we will most likely never ever choose to do this, but the fact that it's illegal is extremely unfair. And I'm like, you know what? I'm a very empathetic person. So whether or not I agree with someone, I do like to see their point of view, and I can completely understand the point of view. I don't have I don't have a dog in that race, but I understand the idea of wanting to be like, I wouldn't want, if I was the modern feminist movement woman, which I couldn't be further removed in every area. If I was that person, I wouldn't want that to be the case. So I understand where you're coming from. And then the other point of view is something that I found extremely interesting, is that they were saying what we are fighting against the most here is the core thing that it is sexualized, because we don't want it to be. And I'm like, that is something I never would have thought of. I never would have thought that was the end goal of the people doing all this. It's everything you're saying is correct. You right now, about like saying, well, because it's so deeply sexualized and it's so deeply this, that's the problem. But if you have a group of people who their main goal is to desexualize that as a concept, because let's both be honest, it really probably shouldn't be. And there's a reason why it's not in most places. Like, I get it.
Well, I can tell you why it is sexualized in the places where it is, and why it isn't in the places where it isn't.
You mean on the front of a woman? Because that's exactly where it's sexualized.
In what cultures are where women's breasts are viewed sexually as sexually attractive, and why as a culture in the places where they're not, because it's something I've looked into. You can see where the places, basically the places, and this also explains why the modern feminist movement wants to remove it from sexualization. Because if you really pay attention to it, the feminist movement isn't pro anything, it's anti everything. It started off being anti-church and anti-family in the 1880s or 1890s when it got started. And the woman who started it, actually, she made that statement that there was the family and the church were the biggest enemies to women.
So true.
But
Stunning and brave. Keep going.
Yeah. But when you look at this, the reason why, like, anything that's attractive about a person will eventually become sexually attractive. That's just how it is. And in Western culture, they saw a woman as a respectful thing, or a respectable thing, I guess. And we like women because we like women and we revere women because women can do the thing that we absolutely cannot do. They can become mothers.
Oh yeah.
And like there's absolutely no way a man can be a mother. It just cannot happen. And so we want to revere that. And so we see a woman, and then we see the breasts are a symbol of motherhood, effectively. And we revere that about women and say, hey, look, you're able to do this thing. You know, you can have babies and you can feed these babies. And, you know, these, and when you have big ones, I mean, it's not true, but it's a thing. When you have big ones, you have a better supply to feed my children. And you're going to be a great mother, and I respect that about you, and I like that about you. Whereas if you go to other cultures, women are not respected. Like, because I don't know where this joke came from that everywhere else women were revered and put on a pedestal, and Western culture hates them. There's been no culture in the history of the world that respects women more than Western culture, and that even goes
by a long shot.
And
by
that,
a long shot.
Yeah. And that even goes to show you in the points of attraction to a woman. You go to other places where women are like the only purpose that you have, whereas instead of respecting you for your ability to be a mother, your only purpose is to be a mother. And then people talk about, hey, look at that. Well, of course, and this isn't true either, but it used to be a thing that people talked about. This woman has wide birthing hips, which means she can give birth to many big sons.
At the same time.
Yes. And so you can be like, so I can, so you come here and that's the whole purpose that you have is to pump out kids. And then you have those cultures and the primary point of attraction is the butt. If you have a large, whereas in Western culture, if you have large breasts, you're more attractive. If in other cultures, if you have a large butt, you're more attractive. And that's actually why, people thought that the butt even had so much to do with birth in many African countries. That's the only part of the body that women are required to cover is their butt, because you always cover whatever you think is the sexual part, because in those certain, I forget where, but certain African cultures, certain African tribes, I guess you'd call them, because it's not the whole thing, it's smaller ones. They knew sex was a great thing to do, but they didn't think it had anything to do with children. They thought the butt had something to do with children, and so that's why women had to keep their butts covered.
Well, kids do come out of the butt,
and so that's why I don't believe those people who said it has other than the fact that they're trying to either way, either they are telling the truth and they are trying to remove it from being considered sexual, in which case they are like that. That's really not good for the reasons I just described, going into long detail. Or they're not telling the truth, which I find just as likely. And the reason why I find that just as likely is, because you said it was the main people doing it over there on that section of it were were two lesbian persons.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, and so it's very unlikely that anything anything started. And you can look at how culture is going today and see everything like this. It's extremely unlikely that any movement started by sexually perverse persons is not sexual in nature.
I was about to make a joke. You were about to say like anything started by a lesbian, and I was joking, and then you completely went there.
There you go. I went there. But no, it's true though. Like look at everything else going on today. Like even the stuff that all these people are saying, no, it's like it goes stuff with the kids like it's not sexual at all. We're not trying to sexually indoctrinate your kids. Anyways, kids, let me teach you how to masturbate. It's
we could not be further off topic right now.
I mean, we're talking about sexual morality.
I guess it's true.
It's just such a big, deep topic. But we do have to move on though, because we're 30 minutes in.
I definitely thought we were going to gloss over this chapter.
Okay. All right. Let's just get right to the point. Right here. The Christian rule is either marriage with complete faithfulness to your partner, or else total abstinence. All right. Next chapter.
Oh no, I was going to talk about the pork chop thing because it's really interesting.
Oh yeah. Oh, the pork. Okay, we'll talk about the pork chop thing.
I'm gonna read the quote, and then we'll talk about it really quickly because the quote doesn't address this whole thing because it's too long to read. Blah.
And then you realize it's not a pork chop.
Exactly. You can get a large audience together for a striptease act, and that is to watch a girl undress on the stage. Now, suppose you came to a country where you could fill an entire theater by simply bringing a covered plate to the stage and then slowly lifting the cover so as to let everyone see just before the lights went out that it contained a mutton chop or a bit of bacon. Would you not think that in the country something had gone wrong with the appetite for food? He says a ton about this, and he brings up a lot of backing evidence, and it's all really good. But the point he addresses is what the reader would come to automatically. You'd say, "Oh, well, it's a place where there's no
starving,
food, and so people are starving, and there's a problem with that." And he says, well, you should look into seeing, do people eat a lot of food there? Are people getting plenty of food there? Are they eating too much food there? Is this because they've had it so much that now they're addicted to it in some way? Is it because of this? And then he goes on to relate that to do we have such a mindset towards sex as a human beings, as a culture, as whatever, it depends, because we've had too much, because we haven't had any, or because we've had it wrong. And this is one of those things where I just wish people would read the chapter, because I don't even know that I want to try to sum it up, because he does it so masterfully well. If you have a quote in front of you with a good summary quote, I couldn't think of a summary quote good enough, but it's such an interesting thought exercise for me, because he goes into each of those three things. Is it because we've had too much? Is it because we've had too little? Or is it because we've had it wrong the whole time?
Yeah. Now, I am also, there's something that I don't believe he mentions in here, but it's something worth mentioning. And that is this, going back to the same thing. There are things that happen that are indicative of a perverted sexual appetite, and those same things that are indicative of an already perverted sexual appetite, or I will say perverted because perversion typically refers to something else, and that's what I'm talking about. So I'll say a corrupted sexual appetite, I guess. But those things that are indicative of a corrupted sexual appetite in society as a whole, if those activities are engaged in by a person with a person with a normal sexual appetite, that will, in most cases, eventually lead to the corruption of that person's normal sexual appetite. And so you're like, what on earth are you talking about? I'll give the fantastic example of pornography.
Pornography.
The fact that pornography exists and is so prevalent shows that the sexual appetite of today's society has been corrupted. But then, if you go out and you say, I'm going to watch a bunch of porn, and you continually do so, that will lead to your currently normal sexual appetite becoming corrupted. Mm-hmm. Good times.
Good times. Yeah, that it's the things that we've come. I think you and I have now gotten old enough. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've noticed this, and I would assume you have too, because we're not that far apart in age. Mm-hmm. We've reached a point in society where things. I think a lot of things have changed positively. I think a lot of things have changed negatively.
Mm-hmm.
But I've noticed the attitude towards pornography is so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's gone from like when we were kids, like everyone knew it was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It might come up in conversation randomly, but no one admitted to it, right?
Yeah.
Like no one admitted they were that was a thing that they did. I mean, maybe to like really close friends or something, or maybe like certain individuals, but I mean, it wasn't a wide thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, and I'll be honest, especially in my late teens, that was pornography was a serious issue for me,
Mm-hmm.
very serious issue for me. And I mean, like, even with that, I never found someone else who was like, yeah, man, totally. I was like totally like jacking it the other day. No one talks like that.
Mm-hmm.
No one's saying that. But if you go now, I'm on Facebook and I'm scrolling through like you know how like now on Facebook they have like those little short reels of videos of pages that you follow
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. So one of the pages that I follow, this happened to me most recently, and it was one of the more like eyebrow raising, holy crap moments. This has been a while ago, and since then I've seen a lot of examples of this.
Mm-hmm.
Barstool Sports randomly posts hilarious videos of people getting, I don't know, dunked on or falling over, and it's randomly funny. And so, like, every once in a while, I'll see a funny video. And the other day, I was like, oh, this looks really funny. I clicked on it, and it went to their next thing, and the guys were like, so, like, what would you say is your most viewed porn category? And I was like, wait a minute. There's a room full of dudes and girls broadcasting to the entire world where I can see that, I don't know, a couple 100,000 people have viewed this, where they're discussing which type of pornography they view the most. I was like, wow, it's so different than 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy to see how far people have in their minds gone about the public as a whole has become that much more accepting of something like that is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's genuinely mind blowing. Maybe I'm making a bigger deal of it than it actually is. I don't know. Maybe everyone thought this was normal. I don't know, but I don't think it's very normal.
No, absolutely not. It's there's not only is it not normal, it's not good. But no, that's
especially when you have, and I've watched a lot of these videos too. I can't remember who puts them out. It started like a Christian organization started these, and then it became a more mainstream publication was doing these things, and now it's come out a lot more. I mean, it's been happening for a very long time, but it's been happening a lot more. That it's coming out, shockingly enough, how terrible these places that produce pornographic videos are, and the type of people that are running them, and the type of things that they're doing. Everyone's like, I can't believe this. I'm like, you can't believe this? You're watching a video of absolutely, it's not like it's like, oh, this guy was like, yeah, we someone paid us to have sex on camera, and then people watched it, and we got money for that. Like incredibly insane and sometimes really disgusting stuff. And people are like, I can't believe this bad stuff is happening to these women. People aren't respecting these women that are just basically being there to be stared at while they have sex with someone. I mean, I don't know how it's shocking people that these places are bad, but even with like tons and tons of information coming out about how terrible these places are, that is happening more and more. We're getting more and more information of how these places are bad and these people are bad, and it's becoming even more and more accepted than it ever was. That's what's crazy to me. It's the rise in popularity and acceptance is perfectly parallel with the rise of us finding out how absolutely terrible it is. That's insane to me. Sorry, that's a tangent that I get really weird about because it blows my mind. But we should probably move on. But that blows my mind.
Yep.
Society, you're bad.
Okay. So it's there is a tiny quote in here that I'm gonna that I want to give. I turned the page and saw
Please
it. And I wanted it. Said modern people are always saying sex is nothing to be ashamed of. They may mean two things. They may mean there's nothing to be ashamed of in the fact that the human race reproduces itself in a certain way, nor in the fact that it gives pleasure. And if they mean that, they are right. Christianity says the thing. It is not the thing nor the pleasure that is the trouble, But of course, when people say sex is nothing to be ashamed of, they may mean the state into which the sexual instinct has now got is nothing to be ashamed of. If they mean that, I think they are wrong. I think it is everything to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of what we're just going over, but I wanted to have his words on that.
The first part, people like to talk about Christianity. I'm trying to find there's a scripture here I'm trying to find. It's in Hebrews. Give me a second. I have to pull up my Bible app.
And while you're pulling that up, and I think I know the script. Hold on. I think I know the scripture, so I'll go ahead and quote it for you.
I can quote it too, but I want to read it because I think there's a scripture around it that I can't quote.
Okay. Yeah. Well, while you're looking it up, there's a.
I already found it. Keep going.
Okay. I was gonna say there was a thing that I was gonna say about this, and what was it? There's a thing that okay. My thing's gonna take a second. So you read your scripture, and then I'll say what I was saying.
I'm only going to read half the scripture. I hate people that do this. No, I'll read the whole scripture. I can't stand people who do that. And I am reading KJV. Come at me. Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. I'm going to read the rest of it. But whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. Yes, obviously. Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed is undefiled. So that right there is backing up what he says, and it's kind of shooting down what a lot of other people say. Like, well, Christianity is this. Like, no, what that means, very bluntly, is like, there's nothing boring about Christian sexuality. It's you, and it's that other person, and God's like, yeah, fair game, do whatever, go nuts, have fun, yes, have a great time.
Yeah, see, sex being nothing to be ashamed of in and of itself within the bounds of marriage is that is true, and that's why there's nothing wrong with you and me, with us, yeah, you and me talking about the.
I was wondering where you were about to go with that. There's nothing wrong with you and me, us.
No,
like,
no. I said us because I was making sure me was correct and not I in that case. There's nothing wrong with us or you and me or really anybody talking about the concept of sex, where people think, oh, sex is nothing to be ashamed of. Why are you talking about it? Because, like, I'm not going to talk about mine and my wife's sex life because it's not anything to be ashamed of, but it is private.
I've never understood. Wow, we're getting off on a tangent, but I don't care. I have never in my life gone up to someone and be like, so me and the wife last night? Never. Who in the world thinks that's okay? Like, every time someone starts off with that, I'm just like, stop talking about it. What is wrong with you?
If I was ever to say that, it would be a joke and something that didn't actually happen last night.
Right. Well, that's different. But I mean, like, if someone is actually about to tell me, excuse me, they're like, so me and the wife, I'm like, no, absolutely not. What is wrong with you? I've never understood people that do that. I don't cringe easily. Yes, I do. I shouldn't say that. I cringe easily. I don't cringe easily about that kind of stuff. Like, if I'm talking with my wife about it, then yeah, that's a perfectly normal conversation. The second it's with some random guy, who thinks that's okay? Sorry, that just bugs me so much.
Well, I guess so the only time I would, and if it's something that actually happened, would be if there was something legitimately funny that happened. Yeah. So for example, there was one time dead in the middle of the act that my wife loudly farted, and it was so funny.
Well, see, I mean, like, people who are saying it to be like, check out this really awesome thing. Well, like, one time I pooped. That's different.
Yeah, like I mean, like, I'm just glad that I don't know anyone who like to go around don't know anyone who likes to go around talking about stuff like that. I'm especially glad I didn't go to college with people who like to talk like that. Chase.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's why. By the way, that's why I didn't like to hang out with that guy.
There's a grocery list of reasons why I don't like to hang out with that guy, but he was puppy dogging me all the time. Anyways, yeah. So the thing that I was gonna yes. Oh, no. If you're going to finish your thought, please finish your thought. I'll say it immediately after.
Yeah. The thing that I was going to say, I read an article about a week or so ago, and it made me so angry. And here's why. The thing was called 7 reasons, or not 7 reasons, 7 ways that the church lies to you about sex. And it was written by a supposedly Christian person. I say supposedly. I'm not going to doubt that he is, but just I'm just saying he says he is a Christian author, and that's why I say that. But anyways, and here's why it made me mad. Not because he was saying, "Hey, look, the church teaches you this, but you really don't have to do that." It's really it's not actually how it is. You don't really. The reason why it made me mad is because everything the guy said was technically true, but then worded in a way that was extremely deceitful. Like, for example, one of the things that he said was, one of the lies the church teaches you about sex is that if you are not a virgin at the time that you get married, you are damaged goods and not worth as much. And he said, because, yes, that is something you shouldn't have done, but God can forgive anything, and, your future husband should be able to forgive the acts of your past too, because, if God can forgive, so can we. And yeah, that's true. That is absolutely true. If you weren't, if I went to marry a girl, and she hadn't been, and she wasn't a Christian previously, and then did all this stuff and then became a Christian and was forgiven for that, yes, I could forgive those acts as well. But the way the dude worded it in the article, it sure made it seem like, so don't worry about it. If you want to do stuff before you get married to somebody, God'll forgive you. It's okay. And it made me so mad.
The only thing I remember, and you'll remember this too,
Mm-hmm.
I hate this a ton.
Mm-hmm.
This is borderline combating you here, but it's not really. I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that they used to do they did it at church camps.
Sucker.
They did it at the sucker thing. Made me so angry.
Mm-hmm.
It angered me so much because I can't imagine a quicker way to make a handful of people feel like they are a piece of crap. I hated that. Were you there at the Valentine's Day banquet where I made that preacher mad for that thing?
I don't remember. I was the second guy with the sucker one time.
Yeah, I think everyone was at once, or the third. It just depends.
Yeah, but you finish your thing. I'll tell you what I did because it was funny.
So I don't remember what you did. For those of you who don't understand the sucker thing, basically to show, to give an example of either purity or being a virgin until marriage or whatever, basically was they would put 3, 4, however many dudes in a line, and they would hand a sucker to the first kid. They said, give it get it in your mouth, get a really good taste of that, whatever, and then hand it to the next guy. Goes, do you want some of that? And the next guy, except for Sean, I'm sure, was the point here, would always go, no, I don't want that. That dude's already had that. And they'd be like, that's what it's like when a girl, and I'm like, So what I did one time is I was like the second one in line or the third or whatever. He goes, do you want that? I promptly grabbed the sucker, walked over to a drinking fountain that was nearby, washed the sucker off, and put it directly into my mouth. And immediately said, usually we wash in between these things. And he was very upset. But it made me really angry because, like, there was at least a handful of people in that room who are going to have, like, borderline trauma for the rest of their lives of basically, like, a handful of people looking at them like they were a giant pile of crap, which is not how Christ looks at you, children. And then, like, you just make people... I get it. It gets your point across, but, like, it made me so mad. Maybe irrationally so. Go ahead with your story.
So, yeah, I was the second guy in the line, and so the first guy took it, and he licked the sucker, had all the stuff, and they said, all right, now you take it. Okay, I got it. He said, would you want to lick that sucker? I said, yeah, sure. I took it, shoved it in my mouth, la 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 la, and then I handed it to the next guy. I said, you want it?
Yeah. Which is beautiful. Do it for the memes.
Because that's a fair way that way to scare you and say, oh, nobody wants the non-virgin. That's not too unfair of a way to speak to a bunch of people that you know for a fact are virgins. that is a very unfair way to speak to a crowd where some people may not be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, there's different conversations you'd be having with different people, and that is just like in a room. When it happened to me, it was at a Valentine's Day banquet. I mean, you're like literally in a room where you at least don't. It's like it was a whole bunch of different churches getting their youth groups together. You don't know at least 150 people here. You're a bit of a jerk. That makes you a bit of a jerk.
Yeah.
Anyways, hey,
yeah.
we need to pause for me to say something here.
Yes.
We are never going to finish this book today.
Yeah. Hey, I don't care how many parts it takes to get through through the overarching book. You know?
That's fine. But I'm just preparing you and me mentally. We were like, we're going to finish book 3 today. And I just looked at how many more chapters we have to go and how, like, at this next one, honestly, we've talked so much about this. I feel like we should just gloss over the next chapter.
There's one
as we
thing,
can, and then there's so many good deep chapters after this.
Yeah. As I was brushing up last night, there was one specific thing I wanted to talk about in chapter 6. And that was because this is the concept of Christian marriage, and I thought that because I was because I was when I was brushing up on this yesterday, and they yeah, because I was brushing up on this yesterday, and this thought came to my mind, and I wanted to mention it, because this is very interesting to me. So the marriage, of course, like, is referred to as being one flesh, and my mind goes to the Portuguese man of war, the animal, not the ship, because it's kind of a single organism in a way, but it's also a colony of organisms at the same time. So it's more than one creature while still being one creature. And that so the concept of marriage to me really really aligns with that, at least a little bit. And then because he mentions here, the idea of divorce, he said, every Christian at the very least recognizes it as a surgical operation where the organism is split apart and destroyed in some way or other. And some view it as saying it's not possible to not ever do it because it's the total destruction of the organism. Or some say, yeah, it's like it's like, there are times when it can be done, but only rarely, and it has to be very qualified in a very particular way, and so on and so on. And that, to me, that goes back to goes back to the concept of sexual purity. The only time that we are permitted to that we as Christians are permitted to go through a divorce process is when Jesus said, with the one exception of fornication, and that is when two people are one flesh, they cannot be separated. However, if I marry a girl and I say, hey, look, I'm married, and it turns out she wasn't who she said she was, and she had already been made one flesh with another man, well, we three can't be one flesh, so I could at that point say, sorry, I'm, this isn't the case, and that's the only time that divorce is acceptable. And so therefore, anytime two people are one flesh, anytime two people are one flesh, that cannot be separated, except, of course, except by the natural ending of things, which is death. And that initially, to me, that immediately, to me, made a parallel to the evils of abortion, because because if you think about this, it's not like you could there's two separate individuals, the mother and the baby, but you could almost, because they're feeding off the same food and the same having the same blood circulating through and everything, you could almost, in the same way that you could consider the Portuguese man of war a single organism, you could almost consider, while the baby's in there, the two of them being one person. And so to forcibly remove and destroy that. There's never an acceptable time to forcibly remove and destroy that baby, until it reaches its natural end, which is birth. In the same way that there is no acceptable reason to marriage being two people being one, there's no reasonable allowable way to to end that once that happens, because it can't, it's not good and it can't be done. And I got to think about that before, and everyone I can think of, and I'm sure someone's going to know someone, say, oh, actually this person is like this, but I would go out on a limb until I'm proven wrong. I would go out on a limb and say that everyone views it the way I do, to the extent that everyone who's okay with abortion is okay with divorce, and vice versa, to some extent or other. And there you have it.
I mean, there's a few things. Mm-hmm. I'm just gonna let your comments just ride. I don't really have a lot of things to piggyback onto that.
Yeah.
There's very, very quickly drop a C.S. Lewis quote or two in here. Mm-hmm. Just because he has some really, really good ones in here. This is not a controversial one at all. I think we've had a few in here that are controversial, but I mean, even people, one or two. He says something in here that is also widely talked about by marriage counselors, by anyone. Mm-hmm. This isn't a new piece of information, but he's talking about it, and it's good to say. If love is the whole thing, then the promise can add nothing. And if it adds nothing, then it should not be made. Chesterton once pointed out that those who are in love have a natural inclination to bind themselves by promises. Love songs all over the world are full of vows of eternal constancy. A promise must be about things that I can do, about actions no one can promise to go on feeling in a certain way. Knowledge can last, principles can last, habits can last, but feelings come and go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's just worth touching on, because it's obviously one of the most, it's like the number one marriage counsel thing. Mm-hmm. When people are talking about, like, we're having problems, well, just because you don't feel, it's just worth mentioning, because it's such an integral part of what he's getting at.
Yeah, and see, and there's another thing too. Like, when I immediately saw this, my mind, when he said the feeling of being in love will eventually go away, and my mind immediately said, oh, I don't think so. I'm still deeply in love with my wife. And then I thought harder about that, and I said, but it's different. It is different than when we first got married. Like, because what does it mean to be in love right at the beginning? And how is that different to now? I'll go ahead and tell you, yes, I would say I am more in love with my wife than when we first got married, and I love her more than when we first got married. But then when you think about, the other aspect of it, activities, right? When you first get married, your activities may take place 2, maybe 3 times a day.
Just certain activities.
Yeah, and what you realize when it goes on for a while, that changes to 1 and no more than 4 times a week.
That's people equate that infatuation. Mm-hmm. With love specifically, and it's the reason why you have these people who are like, they'll spend like a weekend with someone, like, I think I'm in love with this person. Like, I promise you aren't. Mm-hmm. I promise you aren't. I have no question in my mind that you aren't, because you haven't had the ability to be in love with that person. You just haven't. It's not how it works. It's a completely different thing, and the after is the long-term version is less exciting and twice as useful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey, I think we have enough time. I think we have enough time to hit one more chapter and then finish off this book next week, because the next chapter is a easy, fast one to talk. It's extremely deep in its thing, but as far as just talking about it, it should be very easy, because the next chapter is forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. True. Mm-hmm. You're not wrong.
Yeah, and so that's very. I think that's very easy to talk about. Like, Jesus said, if you do not forgive others, then God will not forgive you. And then forgiving others, as he said, deals with loving your neighbor. Of course, your neighbor includes your enemy. But then he also said loving someone doesn't necessarily mean liking them. And then he made the statement, and that I wholeheartedly agree with. And he said, I have trouble understanding how I could hate everything that a man does, but still go on loving that man. So, but then I realized there was one man I'd been doing this to all my life, and that was myself.
Yeah, I was actually gonna. That's the quote I have written down to talk about in this chapter. It's my favorite. How could you hate what a man did and not hate the man? And later, it occurred to me that there was one man to whom I had been doing this all my life, namely myself. In fact, the very reason why I hated the things was that I loved the man. Just because I love myself, I was sorry to find out I was the sort of man who did those things. That was one of my. It's one of the best explanations of the love the sinner, hate the sin I probably have ever heard, and I'm a big fan.
Yeah, so I am. I think that there's one sentence that describes me better than any other sentence in this book, and that is this one right here from the previous page, where it said, "Do I think well of myself? Think myself a nice chap? Well, I am afraid I sometimes do, and those are no doubt my worst moments."
For me, this is where that little introduction there. I don't think he did this on purpose. That little sentence you just quoted, and then the thing that I just quoted, is kind of the start of what we're going to see later on as we get through the rest of this book, of the more in depth parts of Christianity for him. Because if you when you get into the deep stuff, he starts talking about, we're not talking about like, here are the 10 Commandments and here's how you continue being a Christian. He gets into the really nitty gritty of explaining the details of how you get through your everyday life. And I feel like that was the first little nudge towards that. Those sentences right there, those little itty bitty inward looks, that's his first little bit of it. And I liked in my second reading, I think I picked up on that a little bit. Because he's not technically talking about those things just yet. He's going over the basics before he gets into the deep stuff. And this was like the first glimpse he gives you of that.
Yeah. And then and then he goes into saying that, you can forgive a man and still not only push for him to be killed, but also kill him yourself while still forgiving him and still loving him. And that seems difficult because you know that the actions that he does, because he said the same thing, if you were the person who did those actions, then the right thing to do would be to push for yourself to be killed. Go to someone and say, hey, I did these things, my things are worthy of death, kill me. Because that is the right thing to do, and if you can do that to yourself, you can do that to other people. And that made me think, you and I both know we knew a man very well, and who we recently found out did some terrible, terrible things, and then it was found out he did those terrible things, he killed himself. And I was thinking about that man when I was reading this book, because I am glad that he is dead, because what he did was deserving of death. If I had seen him, it's possible that I would have carried it out myself. But then also, I am very sorry that he did kill himself, and I wished it hadn't have happened that way, because that allows no space for repentance, and even he... I wish that even he had the opportunity for that. And so that, to me, that's an example of hating everything he did and desiring that the appropriate punishment be carried out, but then still loving the man. Because, like I said, because it's like, hey, the man is dead. Good. He killed himself. Crap. I wish that...
That's a rough example because of obviously how close it hits to home for you and me without without doxing anything here. But
yeah,
that's a really rough one. But yeah, that's a good example.
But yeah,
on that beautiful, wonderful note,
we have to end on a high note.
Yeah. Well, that's suicide, everyone. Good night.